Hi, we're going to do a video on collimating from A to Z, how I do it, and hopefully some of that will help. A lot of guys will put their primary underneath by just looking through the factory eyepiece, and it does work, and the one with the hole and the reflector on the back. But if you've noticed that the gap around the secondary mirror to your focuser is quite big, so you can get it lined up under there, but it's hard to tell exactly if it's underneath. So get a Cheshire, and I recommend one that is smooth all the way down, because some of them have a little ridge here so that they go in and stop, kind of like this here. I'm not sure if that one will stop or not, but I have had to put mine in for different processes almost all the way down, especially when you're putting the primary mirror in focus. So that's an important distinction, and we'll be getting to that. Okay, the first thing you want to do is take your spider out. Remove these 4 nuts. Be very careful with your mirror, of course. We'll go right through. This is basically for your first setup. There's a few things we'll do that probably will never have to be done again. Just checked. This scope has been flocked, so it's a little tough to see in there. And we've blacked out the secondary already. And I'm going to show you a mechanical way of putting the secondary in there, centered. There. Just go in here and loosen up this and tighten this center one just a little bit on your focuser. If, when you press down on the top and hold your focuser still, or just press down on it, if it slides down in, then you need to adjust this little nylon, there's a nylon fitting in there, a little bit tighter against that focuser rod, and then retighten this, loosen these two, and that will, these set the plate wherever this is snug to. So just loosen these two, snug the plate, and then retighten, and you got that step done. I'm not going to do this right now, but go ahead and take your 4 screws out if you want to do this step, and take your focuser right off your telescope so that you can measure the distance from the leading edge of your telescope to the center of the hole. There's several methods to do that, but the whole idea is to be able to transfer that measurement here inside your telescope so that you can, well, you have to cut a hole in your flocking here and put a little donut there. Mine ended up changing, so I've got a little X mark on it, but that's so that the next step we can make sure your focuser is put on your telescope squarely, or put your laser in and see if it hits your dot perfect. I doubt if it will. Right here is your locking screw. Unlock all 3 of these first. Screw this down until it's very snug, all 3. Here's one. And when they're very snug, all 3, back them out about a turn and a half so that you know that this part of the focuser is level to this part of the focuser. That's a good starting point. Okay, I've got my laser sitting in there, and you can see that it's just on the back side of the donut there. The focuser now is adjusted. I would suggest to get one of those compression fittings, but if not, you can rotate this around, because as soon as you tighten this screw up, your laser instantly goes off center. As you can see, right there is centered, and then as soon as I tighten it, boom, it goes way off. So just set it in there and turn it around and see if it needs collimating, for one thing. If it does need collimating, go collimate it. Build yourself a jig and aim it on the wall and make sure your laser is nice and centered. Okay, so as soon as you get that, so that's hitting right there, you know your focuser now. You can test it up high and test it down low if you want. If there's something majorly wrong, it should change during that process. Okay, we're going to use a mechanical way of centering our mirror. We're going to use the Cheshire, which is just an awesome way to do it. We can slide it in and out, and I'll show you how that works. But this is something I suggest to do. Don't lay this, make sure this is very clean, your paper, but lay this on. If you don't want to take it out of the spider, you can lay it up towards the edge of the table like this, and don't move it around. When you lay it down where it is, leave it. Take a pencil and sharpen it on a really heavy angle so that you can get in the back here to draw on this. Like that. Once you get it, piece of paper traced out perfectly like that, take it back up and set it aside. Now, if you want to go to this next step, I would take this completely off, because I'm actually going to do that. I'll show you a couple little things I changed. And we'll get back to the paper in a sec. Okay, make sure you don't drop this, of course. Okay, I've seen online, they've got good videos about that these don't twist very well. Well, there's really elaborate ways of doing it, or I'm into the really simple ways. So these little indents that get made in the aluminum do stop you from rotating it if you're collimating a lot. So get a washer and take a little piece of plastic, any kind of plastic, and fit that between there. Usually there's plenty of room. If you're having a problem getting the mirror back too far when you're collimating, then you might not be able to do this step, but there's usually quite a gap here so that you can do this. I'm not sure if I would, yeah, I think I'm going to change it so my spring goes all the way to the front. I don't want to compress it as much as I was, so I'm going to change that. Get yourself, this came out of a CD holder. This come out of a CD holder, not them really rigid plastic ones, but the more rubbery ones, and it works really well. Okay, cut this out just as accurately as you can. This is going to be our template to find the center of our mirror. Take it and fold it in half. Move it around until you're really happy that you got the shape right. There. This will give us our halfway point. As you can see, what we're going to do is place this on the mirror, and I'm not going to do it because I don't want to scratch mine. I hope you don't either, but you just lay it on there very carefully and mark where they are, where those marks are, and mark them with some tape. There, just like that. After you get this made, now you have something to measure to exactly on each side. And I'll show you once it's back in the telescope how we do that. What I like to do is back these 3 screws out until they're flush. It's my starting point. Yeah, it's close enough. Okay, assembly. Put your center screw in, your spring. See, the problem with this is that it can flop around a lot, but once it's got some pressure on it and you center it, you'll be okay. But I think the spring should go all the way through. And then your plastic for, oh, we don't want it that way. We want the smooth side against the plastic. Just like that. Okay? reassemble the mirror. And those marks that were in the secondary, we sanded down slightly by rotating it on a piece of sandpaper. But screw this all the way in. And now it's ready to put back in. This can be a little fussy. Make sure your telescope is flat, like everybody says, in case you drop something down it doesn't hit your primary mirror. That would be ugly. Okay, when we go to measure this with the inside ruler, we want to square it up. But that might not be exactly center because the metal can fatigue maybe on one spot a little more. But we're gonna even with the flocking in there, it's a little tougher. But just get them finger tight. I have mine taped where I like it. The round end fits nice and will push the flocking back slightly, but I go to the outside edge here. My tape is my good starting spot. Make sure it's centered on the bolt head, and you can see that that's about right. This one I'll have to loosen a little. Press the flocking down nice and tight. There. There's a really good starting spot. Now later we might find that it's not perfectly underneath the eyepiece, and we might have to change that right and left. But the up and down, we want to really concentrate on that and get that right on what the telescope, the tension, the kind of tension you like to have. I'm going to go in 1 millimeter more. I like it to be a little bit on the tight side, and that looks about perfect. Okay, for this step we usually put in a piece of paper opposite of the focuser to lend with some contrast, but now I've got a new way of doing it. I like to just put this yellow piece of envelope. I've seen somebody do this and it works a lot better for me. Since we blacked out the back of the secondary, you can see that a little bit when you're trying to look at the gap around it when we're centering it in that eyepiece. And if you put the contrast paper in the back, half of it's white and half of it's black, so it doesn't look right to me. So when you put the yellow in the back, I'll show you how that looks. Try not to touch your secondary, of course. And that's all there is to it. Now, when we look down through the mirror, we will see the yellow mirror and the black around it, and that's going to work better once we get the Cheshire in. You'll see, or hopefully I can explain it. I can't show you it. If you have a compression eyepiece holder that centers it, that's great. But here's your Cheshire, and what I'm going to do is look in here and move it up and down. I can see that the mirror is way too far forward at this point, but I'm going to move the Cheshire up and down until I get a really small gap. But first, we're going to make a rough measurement front and back. Make sure that these are backed out. Wait a minute. Here we go. Bottom that out. Tighten these up until they just touch. That's our starting point. Now, loosen this, and the spring should hold it you know, square it up with the eyepiece the best you can at this point. We're just doing a forward and backward rough alignment at this point. And it's definitely far enough back at this point. So I've got a gap that's about equal front and back on the mirror. So what I want to do is count the turns in. Keep something up or just count them till it touches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 touched. So let's try this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 touched way early. I'm guessing we're going to have to go back to 4 at this point. Let's go back to 4. Back to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, just touching. Great. We got a little bit of tension on it. That's bringing it up to level. What I would do is go back and look inside again. And we got front and back really well. But the gap here in the Cheshire is definitely off. So the spider needs to be moved right or left just slightly to get that gap centered. We got our forward and back underneath the Cheshire just perfectly. So now we're going to change this. I'm going to back this one out about a turn and put this one in a turn and have a look, see. That brought it in. You can move your Cheshire down until it just about, the reflection just about touches the mirror all the way around. And I've noticed, the reason we do this mechanically now is I've noticed that you can move this, you know, right and left. You can turn it and it still looks round, and I've moved it probably a millimeter. So I go through this next step. Yeah, that looks really good. I'm going to move these equally in. Half. I want to get a little more tension on it. Yeah, that's getting good and snug now. Yeah, it's sitting underneath just about perfect. Then you can fine tune it by moving this. You can try different. Yeah, I like that. That looks good. Okay, remember we marked the mirror. Take the Cheshire out. Hard to show this, but maybe if I set this up right here. Okay, it's kind of hard to show this, but you take a wire tie and cut it after put your focuser about halfway in its travel, and have this line up with that top edge, or, well, I wouldn't do the bottom edge, I'd do the top edge. But hook this on, make sure you don't touch your mirror. Hook this on the edge, that's your stop point, and like I just did, don't do that. Adjust up your focuser until that is just touching the tape right there. Lock off your focuser. Now I just come down and check this side, and it's not on. It needs to be rotated slightly. And that's the beauty of the plastic. It will enable you to make these very, very small adjustments without those. Here's my wrench. I gotta unsnug this just a little bit. If those three were binding into the aluminum, you couldn't do that tiny bit of adjustment like that. So at 12 o'clock in your focuser, just about touches. I can set that down just a titch if I unlock it. There. So at 12 o'clock, that's just touching the tape. And that one isn't. It's very fussy. That's just perfect. That's good. Re-snug this up. Don't let anything move. Just touching the tape. Perfect. Make sure it's right. I don't think you can do this enough. Seriously. This is the thing that I was having the hardest part knowing that we were on. Okay. Now, like I said, snug this just a little more. That's what I like to do. And we can move on to the next step. Now we're going to use the tabs in the back on the secondary to center that. We're not going to use a laser to do that at this point. I'll take a peek down in there and see just how it is. Another quick little sideline thing here. As you can see, the clips down there are very, very short. I took mine out and cut them in half in the rubber and trimmed them back so that you can't see them very well, and so just to get more light, just being fussing around with it. If you want to play with that, you can too, just as long as you don't take off too much that your mirror falls out. Okay, I'm double checking with the Cheshire. I'm just moving it up and down until the gap. If you got bad eyesight like me, the part of the mirror that's furthest away is in focus, and the part that's closest to the eyepiece is a little bit fuzzy, so it's hard to see exactly. If you move it out, of course the black line all the way around gets a little bit bigger. I like it to just about disappear. As you get closer, of course it just keeps getting closer and closer to the mirror, and you can get a finer black line. Yeah, I like that. I think that's rotated just about perfect. Alright, let's take this out and see what the primary looks like. And it is not exactly in there. So you use these 3 collimating screws to change the tilt so that we can get the mirror perfect. You just fuss back and forth until you figure out what works. It's hard to explain it. But what I'm going for is not the outside edge. I'm going to go by the clips way up, because they're the first thing. If you get in really tight, get in really close here. I like to get the clips to disappear. And the closer you get, all of a sudden the clip edges will disappear. Not if they're not cut off, I don't think they will. But since we shortened ours, they do. And that's what you have to keep doing now until they're equal all the way around. You might want to black out with flat black paint the inside of your Cheshire also, because there's a lot of reflection on it. That machine surface that's black is very shiny, and it sometimes gives you a little too much gloss. Boy, I think we got the clips perfect. All 4 clips now are equal all the way around. Okay, so that's how long it took to do that step. Now, the Cheshire can come out, and you can double check with your laser to see that we're hitting this. We should be really close. If I did that right, we should be really close to hitting the center donut of the mirror with the laser on. And it is almost right in the center. Now this is in real time, as you can see there. Let's zoom in. You can see the donut down there, and I'm doing that turning routine, and it is just about perfect. Now if I want to, if I still think that I could improve it slightly, I will, let me scoot this back so you can see. I do rotate this and look in there, but if you just make sure that this is square, leave this loose and put your finger in the center of it and keep it snug, because that screw seems to really set it off. Just peek in there, see where it wants to be, and you know the routine from here. And like what they say about the milking stool thing, I hate to use all three. Sometimes I like to do the third just to get less tension or more tension. Yeah, that's right on. Alright, I'm going to double check that with the Cheshire. Yep, I can see the clips evenly. Nice. That the crosshairs down in the bottom, that would be used now for when we center the secondary mirror, or excuse me, the primary mirror in the secondary mirror, but we're not going to be using that technique. We are going to take a Barlow, take a 2X Barlow. 3X seems to be a little bit too big, and it just doesn't do it. Take this out, put your laser in it. I've done this before on another video. This works so handy dandy. Aim your window of your laser towards the back, and now this diffuses it, and you can see that there's quite a big red dot down there on the centerpiece. That donut now is glowing, so all we're seeing is a reflection. We're not seeing a beam come all the way back. I'm going to turn this around so that you can see what I'm doing back here now. Okay, now I always screw these in, loosen these up, screw these in all the way until they bottom out. Then I back them out exactly a turn. That's what these little pieces of tape are on here. I back them out about a turn and a half, so that I know my mirror is in a good flat orientation to the scope. And then up there where the reflection is, let's see if I can hand hold this. You can see the reflection of the donut in there, and as you make small adjustments, that center of that donut, you try to line up on your target like that, and that's just about it. And that you're not having to worry about a beam come back up if it's on a good angle or not, because it's just looking at the reflection. The reflection can't be in the wrong spot. And as you snug up those locking nuts, it'll move it back off center. But as you can see, if I move that a little bit, that donut is right in the center of the X, and that is it. Now that we've got the Barlow out of there, we can look in with the peep and see that the secondary is, we know that that's underneath. You can recheck your measurements and re-go through that, but the secondary is focused, or right under the focuser. We can tell that the clips are all perfectly around the secondary. You can look through your Cheshire to make sure. that is really important, because a lot of people like to move that, because when you look at the focuser through the reflection of the primary, and you can tell that the focuser is slightly offset. That's what this picture was about. I said it was a primary. The focuser in the secondary that you see is slightly offset, and that, according to Sky and Telescope, that's proper. I don't understand offset, but since I did that, it has improved things. And another quick side note, if you were ever considering getting a different finder scope, I just got this 9x50 and put it on and set it up, and the first night out I've looked at Jupiter with binoculars, and you can see the 4 moons really well, but I could not believe how good this could. I thought it was less power. It is a 50, and when my binoculars are quite good binoculars, I'm not knocking my binoculars. I mean, they're Nikon 40 by 10 or 10 by 40s, and they do a really good job. But this was just unbelievably crisp and clear. So if you just a little shout out for the Orion 950. I don't like these little set screws. They're plastic. I might make something out of metal. And I put a little bit of butyl on the threads so that they would have a little bit of tension to them. That seemed to help too. And another quick little thing I've seen guys do is they block out, if I can move this, they block out the back for light, but I didn't like some of the things about making it rigid was kind of hard to deal with. But you can make a cardboard one and make it fit all the nooks and crannies and all the around all the screw heads until you get it just the way you like it. And then when you put this in, it's soft. You can use foam. It fits right tight to all the around all the nuts and bolts, and you can be fussier than I was with it. And I actually think that this speeds up the cooling of the fan, because now the air is not just back here blowing around or sucking off of the truck. It actually causes almost a seal, so the air has to come down the tube to get to this. It's almost sealed. I mean, it's not 100% sealed, but I think it does work better. So that's something I would do too if I was you, of course. Blocks out light and helps stray light and helps cooling of the telescope. Well, I hope this was helpful. Be fussy, go back and forth between the tilt of the front mirror and the donut in the back, and every time you do it, it's going to get just a little bit closer. And I really hope this helps. So, clear skies.